Joining us now is Oxbow Advisors Managing Partner Ted Oakley. Ted, the healthcare sector is taking a bit of a hit because of the uncertainty surrounding the healthcare reform. Is there any way to read how the markets might react to what does get done or doesn't get done between now and, say, Labor Day?
Not really, Dagan. I don't think that there's a lot to think about because I think most people probably think they'll take recess and not much will come out of it. As far as the stocks go, I think they're probably already in the stock prices at this point. But we'll have to see, you know. Nobody knows.
But if, say, healthcare, but the markets arguably, in large part from the time of even the election, but certainly the inauguration, rallied on the expectation of pro-growth change out of Washington, healthcare reform and tax reform. So if we don't get that, and it looks increasingly unlikely that certainly tax reform is going to happen anytime, maybe even before the end of the year, don't the markets give way and sell off?
You know, Dagan, I think you're probably right on that. I remember in past years when you would have some tax implications come into fall, people would wait and not sell because they would think that, hey, maybe my taxes will be lower later on. And it never did really happen, and so then you brought some selling into the marketplace. That could happen here. I think people are probably getting frustrated. You've seen this all year long. They thought there'd be tremendous change in the first couple of months of the year, and there really hasn't been. I'm not certain that he didn't reverse things. He probably should have gone for taxes first and Obamacare second, but at this point, I'm not certain either one of them will come through by the end of the year.
Ted, here's Lindsay Bell.
Yeah, Ted, so I have a question for you. If we don't get tax reform, we don't get health care, how do you play the market now? We saw the defensive sector sort of take a lead in mid-May when politics sort of went a little crazy with the Russia investigation and Comey and everything. Is that the way you play the market in the second half of the year or the next 12 months? Is the cyclical trade over? In other words, if we don't get any of these other pro-growth reforms?
Well, it could be. I think people have pushed into the cyclical trade already, and so that would probably go flat. And you'd have to see some other area maybe come up, maybe technology would keep on going. I know it's been in the front. By and large, though, most sectors in the top 6 or so are really expensive, and it's hard to say which one would come to the forefront. But I have a sense that the more defensive sectors would come back into play, and probably the bond market would do better than people expect at this point.
Because we've gotten a sell-off, certainly in treasuries here just recently when there's a story in the Journal about the Federal Reserve talking about how it begins unwinding its balance sheet. But there was nervousness there, but at 2.35% on the 10-year yield, that might be attractive to some. But I want to get your take, Ted, on the Friday jobs report. Economists expecting 180,000 jobs were added last month. The unemployment rate remaining at 4.3%. Any sense of, because again, the prior month in May was a disappointment. What are you looking for?
Well, that's not something we follow quite as closely as wage growth because we think wage growth has a bigger impact on the economy.
Would you expect that to pick up then?
I don't know that wage growth would pick up. I think you could have 175 to 180 on the jobs and still not necessarily have anything in wage growth, but we think that's the most important factor in whether you try to get this economy going or not.
Yeah, wage growth has been reduced in the last several months. It was pretty high in like 2.8, 2.9 year over year early in the year.
What was it in May? It was like 2.
It was like 2.5. Yeah, and I think they're expecting 2.6 this month. So that's not really that much of an improvement.
Harlan, if we start getting, and I want to get your take on this, if we start getting numbers that show weakening, again, the auto sales numbers for Ford, Chrysler, and General Motors were not good for last month. Consumer spending only up 0.1%. If these numbers start weakening, does that get the Republicans off their backsides down in D.C. to get something done?
Here's my question. The Republicans have controlled the House since 2010. And what have they been doing down there? They had so many repeals and replacements of Obamacare that they voted on, but apparently as soon as they had a Republican in the White House, they didn't have something to put forward that could be passed by the Republican caucus. What have you been doing in Washington? What have you been doing?
See,
it should have been pulled. You should have had it on the shelf and pulled it off and passed it to put before the president.
See, I could see that look on your face, Harlan. That's
it's going to explode.
Ted, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Ted Oakley.